Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Christy Taylor. I'm back with another episode of the Career Coach RX podcast. This is our part of our February Blitz. We are celebrating great Black people and all of our savviness in this month of Black history. And today I have on Miss Ariana Johnson. She is Miss Black Ohio. And as part of our celebration and preparation for our Black Health Summit, part of the reason why I brought Ariana on the show today is one to discuss her journey as experiences in college and decided to compete for Miss Black Ohio. And what is it like to compete in a beauty place? Because I think this is something like every little Black girl needs to see, right? We all have the potential to do this. But the other part of this is something that I'm growing very passionate about and really served as the inspiration for the Black Health Summit, which was your platform is Black Maternal Health. So I just want to hand this over to you to start this discussion, to tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you. We can talk about the because we talked a little bit before, Ariana, and you just have, as a young person, you have so much going for you, right? So we're going to talk about your platform about midways through the conversation, but I just want to talk about you. Let's start this off. Like, what inspires you? What motivates you? Tell us a little bit about your background, and let's get this career motivation started.
All right. Well, I'm Ariana Johnson. I was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, in the South Collinwood area. I grew up in a two-parent home. My dad was a sanitation worker. He worked for the city of Cleveland, and my mom was a loan officer. I grew up in the church. My dad actually studied Islam, so I had like a combination of, being open-minded and learning about different religions and different ways of thinking. I went to private school most of my life. I got interested in performing arts when I was like 7 years old. So my mom enrolled me in the Rainey Institute, which is a performing and visual arts center here in Cleveland. And I just started going to like different performing arts programs because my mom was the type of mom that like when she saw something I was interested in, she just cultivated it through, community programming. And when in middle school, I got accepted and attended the Cleveland School of the Arts as a theater major. And I graduated from the CSA in 2008. I went to college. I went to Tri-C for a year because I received a scholarship from the former mayor of Cleveland, Frank Jackson. He was giving scholarships away to CMSD students, Cleveland Metropolitan School students, to attend Tri-C because that was one of the schools that he attended. So I went there for a year for free. And then after that, I transferred to Cleveland State University, where I majored in communications. I was very active on campus. I was the vice president of the Black Student Union. I sat on the Student Government Association as a senator representing the communications major. I became interested in politics from there. I was an intern at the NAACP as a communications major. Intern, excuse me. I went on to become a member of the Northeast Ohio Young Black Democrats. Then I became the first female president of the Northeast Ohio Young Black Democrats. And I just became involved in the political activities here in Cleveland as far as campaigning. I became involved in pageantry when I was in college. My first year of college, I competed in Miss Teen Cleveland. And I didn't know what pageantry was. I didn't have anybody in my family or anybody who I, was connected to who competed in pageants. So I didn't know what it was about. So I just participated because I thought it was fun. I didn't win, but I thought that, I made up in my mind that if I ever had an opportunity to compete again, I would. So like after, college and after I became involved in political activities, like about over a year ago, I decided to go back into pageantry again. I competed in the American Royal Beauties pageant system, and I became Miss Great Lakes. And I competed on the national level. The national competition was in Cincinnati last year. So I spent almost a week in Cincinnati. My mom died. And I didn't win a national title, but I did win a national optional, which was the print model division. And then I heard about the Miss Black Ohio competition. And because I'm just so, I'm a proud Black woman, but, that's one of my first identifiers as being a proud Black woman. And the fact that this pageant, represented Black excellence and, represented Black women, and not only like a way where women are, ranked by their beauty, but ranked by their intelligence and their accomplishments and what they contributed to the community. I was just all in. So I competed in the statewide pageant competition, and thank God I won. And then so now I'm preparing for the national competition. My platform is Black Maternal Health, and I became interested in Black maternal health specifically for because one of my neighbors, while I was a teenager, she gave birth to her first child,
Mm-hmm.
and she almost died in the hospital. And I thought that was very interesting because her mother was a nurse in the hospital that she almost died in, and it was almost because she hemorrhaged to death. To my understanding, she kept bleeding after she gave birth to her baby, and nobody in the hospital went and checked in on her. She almost hemorrhaged to death. And I just thought that that was like, very peculiar, especially when your mom, works in the hospital system in which you give birth to. I thought that there should have been some type of further invested interest in it, but obviously not. And then like I said, I was a political nerd in college, so I used to watch Melissa Harris Perry, who was a political commentator on MSNBC, and she talked about Black maternal health, and that's when I became interested in Black maternal health. And then I went on to earning my master's in social services administration from Case Western Reserve University. And in the beginning
Wow.
of my studies, a lot of my policy research was geared around Black maternal health and how there is a high percentage of Black women. Actually, we as Black women, we die 4 times higher,
Well,
more than our white counterparts.
well,
And
let me slow you down a little bit, because I want to give you a chance to get your story out.
sorry, I'm
Uh,
sorry.
let's kind of go back right to
Yeah,
some of your history, right?
yeah.
So let's talk about from the very beginning. You've always been involved. You touched on something a little bit earlier, where you talked about, how you grew up. It was a lot of early exposure, even to diverse religions, right? They help
Hmm.
you to keep an open mind.
Hmm.
And when you seem to have very much an interest in politics, and the reason why I'm asking these questions is because as a career coach, there it is not a monolithic field. When people come down and talk to me, right, it's
Right,
like, guys, you guys can take many different paths to pursuing the various opportunities that are available to you, right? And
right.
so when you were in college and you talk about how you were involved in all of these things, like, wow, like you had this platform where did I hear you mention earlier, because you were going so fast there,
Oh,
did
I'm
I hear you
sorry.
mention earlier you was involved in student government, right?
Right.
From the very beginning. And before we even get to where your platform is today, what inspired those early onsets of things like being involved in student government, or just being like active in NAACP, and that level of consciousness with you?
Well, it stemmed from my parents. They weren't like well-known activists in Cleveland, but they were community engaged. Like my mom, she was the secretary of our block club in the neighborhood that we grew up in, and she had a good relationship with the then city councilman Roosevelt Coates, to the point where if it was something going on, my mom could call, and he would come down. I remember it was like something in particular. It was a neighbor who had a whole bunch of waste in front of their house, and it was literally right across the street from our house. And one of the kids in our neighborhood slipped and fell on it. And so my mom, alongside with my godmother, who was the president of the of the block club, they like formulated like this campaign, so much so that the media got involved. And I remember like reporters coming to our house, and my mom being interviewed by a reporter about what was going on and what they were trying to do. They were working with Councilman Coates to change, what was to encourage, or more so coerce, the neighbor to clean up the waste in front of their house. And then cut to like when I was 12 years old, I remember my first unofficial job was being a volunteer for Councilman Coates, like handing out campaign literature in the neighborhood. And I got $5 for it, and I went and splurged at McDonald's. But that was like my first official job. So I was like really involved in politics, community outreach and civics because of my parents. And then my dad, him studying Islam, he was very much um I'll say a student of Malcolm X. I grew up and my dad had a picture of Malcolm X on our wall. We had a copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X in my house. And, when my dad would pick me up from school, sometimes he wouldn't play the radio. He would listen to speeches from Malcolm. So I grew up with like this civic, pro-black, very black conscious,
Right.
paradigm. And I didn't embrace it until college because I was like a performing arts kid when I was growing up. But when I grasped onto it, I couldn't let it go. So
Well,
that's
I
what
want
it
to ask
came
you about the performance art piece too. And very few people in my circle know, unless you've been a student of mine, that I also am an American history professor.
from.
And I have said
Really?
on some of the stages, like when we talk about Asala, I have presented at those conferences. And one of
Nice.
those conferences that I presented at was an actual research paper because I love Malcolm X in the sense that I think that he was very misunderstood, right? Whereas you had people who were very actively committing violence. He actually never committed
Right.
violence once he converted, right? And most people, when they see him and they compare him, I can go into a whole history lesson about that. But one of
Mhm.
the research papers that I did was the gerrymandered apocalyptic rhetoric of Malcolm X,
Right.
and I presented that at the asylum because he would have titles like the bullet or the ballot, to scare
Mhm.
you, but he was actually trying to wake you. Now this platform that I'm building as a coach and I'm transitioning from traditional mindset of I'm just a career coach. I'm transitioning my business and my platform to social impact because
Mhm.
my doctorate is in global health. All of the work that I've done has been in health education, courses that I've taught in American history. But I'm also a big fan of the performing arts. And
Right.
so you said that not only did you get this exposure from your parents, I have two questions to ask you. One, I'm going to ask you about the performing arts, and then I'm going to sum it up. I'm going to move into the second half of this conversation, right?
Mhm.
How important was that exposure, to performing arts? So we talk about, the importance of exposing children to our history and roots, right? And
Mhm.
diverse exposure. And then you were also exposed to the arts. Your parents had you embedded in the community at a very young age, but how much of an influence was the arts on your life?
Oh, it played a very pivotal role in just my upbringing and the way that I thought. Like, just me learning at Rainey Institute and learning about artists like Paul Robeson and Lena Horne and Dorothy Dandridge, who's from Cleveland, and Ruby Dee. Like, just learning who they were and then using the performing arts as a creative outlet to express my feelings because I was a very quiet little girl. Like, I didn't really talk unless I didn't talk unless somebody said anything to me. But when I was on stage, it was like I lit up. I went from being an introvert to an all the way extrovert, and I loved it. And so I think that creativity in any form is a great way for children to express themselves. And the way that I was taught, creativity can't be judged. It's I hate, I don't want to throw shade on sports, but sports, somebody got to lose and somebody got to win. And that's just that on that. With creativity, it's more so subjective. You might not understand the platform or the artwork, but somebody else will, and furthermore the artist does. So that's what really like inspired me and really motivated me. Like, you might not get this piece, but at least someone does. And like I said, just learning about great black entertainers and great black performers really inspired me to continue on in the performing arts realm. I think that every child should have an opportunity to study the performing arts if they haven't, if I really, from legislation to funding to community engagement, like every child should have at least some exposure to the arts because it's definitely another form of expressing yourself. And then for me, I grew up in the church. I went to Christian school all the way up until I attended the Cleveland School of the Arts, or CSA, because I'm not gonna keep on saying Cleveland School of the Arts throughout this whole interview. I'll just use the acronym CSA. CSA, it was another exposure. It was a culture shock for me. It was DEI 101. Like, I went to private school with kids who came from this almost the same socioeconomic status that I did. They went to church every Sunday. We were pretty much all of us were very monolithic. And then when I went to CSA, it was like a culture shock. Not only did I go to school with kids from different parts of the city, but all of them came from different socioeconomic backgrounds. They came from different beliefs. They came, that was my introduction to the LGBTQIA plus community. And we were all taught to just respect each other, even if we didn't agree, just respect each other and appreciate what each other brings to this world, and not to be closed-minded. What I've learned through my parents and what I've learned just being, I guess, a student of the arts, is that you don't have to agree with someone, but don't be closed-minded, because somebody who's different from you, whose paradigm is, the total opposite of yours, they can be used to impart wisdom, impart something in you that can help you develop and grow and enhance as a person.
I think that you are so right. We are actually getting ready to publish research on the DEIA framework that we're going to be using as the basis of my coaching moving forward. Because I can go into long conversations about, what I believe DEIA should look like, right? But there are people who really do this work and are passionate. But what you just said there really summed it up, right? So when you sum it up, is that how we treat each other matters. And I think you really kind of answered the question that I was going to ask you from a follow-up sense, which is, with you being so active in school, with you being exposed to the arts and so politically engaged, how does that shape you? But I think that what you just said, right, and how and why is this so important? Because I speak a lot on this podcast, a lot of young people listen in, and one of the things that I try to tell, especially they've been a student of mine, right? One of the things that I try to say is like exposure is important. Mm-hmm. And so the point you just made about being around different people with different perspectives and different backgrounds and experiences as you really answered the question that I was going to ask you about how important is it for children to be exposed. And I want to say this, it's not necessarily about money, right? Because I remember growing up, my grandmother, I would say it would seem weird growing up. Grandmother, it wasn't nothing for to go over grandmama's house and she'd be like, "You're gonna watch Shaka Zulu today." Like we sitting there watching all of the Shaka Zulu movies, all of the episodes of Roots. Like
that was me. That was me. That was me.
I look right here in my old room, like even a lot of Black history, but even some of these old books like Gone with the Wind. Like this is stuff that I was reading. My mom was like, "Hey, you left this book in my room from like years ago." Mm-hmm. But these like 10 years old. And I was telling my other grandma yesterday, I was like, I remember when Alice Haley's Queen came out, I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I asked my grandmother to get that for me as a child on VHS cassette. And I'm 40 years old and I still have that VHS cassette with me. So the things that the way that we're taught, the exposure that we have, some people will get overwhelmed, but there's like you said, there are free community programs. My grandmother had a closet full of books that she had from the 60s and 70s, right? And those books, when we was growing up in the 80s and 90s, those were the books that we read because it was just about exposure to what she had. So if you're out there and you're feeling like, I want my child to kind of have this type of exposure, this readiness and this level of preparation for college, this engagement and awareness about their sense of community, right? It's simply about what you expose it to. And the great thing now that we didn't have when I was growing up was we got the internet. There's so much information out there. Now, I want to transition this conversation because in the middle of you talking, it dawned on me that this is this is like a divine matchup, right? Because I want to give you a little bit of my reasoning and decision to launch the Black Health Summit. So I've never created a platform. I have no intentions to ever be political, but I will use my platforms that I have to talk about when we talk about things like Black History Month, especially me being a history professor, right? I want to make sure that the platform that I'm building, though, that I open it up to people like you who are making that social impact, right? And we speak on the topics that are impacting our community. One topic that personally has affected me is Black maternal health. Mm-hmm. And this whole time I'm looking at your stuff and we preparing for this today's interview, and it didn't even cross my mind. I want to tell you something about why I decided to do the Black Health Summit. Mm-hmm. In early December, I was thinking, I'm like, Christy, you building this platform, and you're transitioning your platform to a social impact model, which back in 2016 when I launched my business, it was healthcare consulting. I was always working with healthcare professionals to do something, mainly the career coaching and resume portion. But now that I have a bigger platform and expanded, I said, okay, I'm thinking to myself, well, what is it that you do to make sure that you have an impact on your community while you're building this platform? So I'm transitioning to build the business to Career Coach RX to still be Career Coach RX, and Work Solutions still Work Solutions, but we're more focused on supporting individuals who are making a social impact, people who are doing community engagement projects like you, right? And so that was my thought in early December. And I have never publicly talked about some of the challenges that I have had with with my own reproductive health.
Mm-hmm.
And so one day in December, I was sitting there and I was listening to a story, and it was about a young lady named Brittany Watts.
Mm-hmm.
And Brittany Watts, if I'm not mistaken, she's from Ohio. Yeah, she's from Ohio. And, she had some of the same challenges that I have had, right? And when she had her baby, unfortunately, the charges was pressed against her because the baby was born as a corpse. She had tried to, I've been there, done that. And I said, okay, I know I have my feelings about abortion. I'm very middle of the road, right? I'm pro-choice, but pro-life for myself, most definitely, right? But in this case, this young woman kept being encountered with instances in the healthcare system where she was basically having to carry a corpse to term. and imagine, and I know with the things I dealt with, I can't imagine the horror of her having to carry that baby to term, knowing it's going to be stillborn. And then once it's born, the baby's born in the toilet, and she gets to the hospital and a nurse decides to lie and say that, to change up the story. And this young lady gets arrested. And eventually the charges were dropped. And that alone is why I said we're going to have a Black Health Summit. And part of the focus is going to be Black maternal health. And I was looking for people to speak on Black maternal health, and I could not find anybody. and literally, once I finally did get the arrangements for a speaker to be able to speak on this topic, because just like you said earlier, and I want to go back to that, where you talked about the experience that your friend's mom had. I remember when I was having a miscarriage, I went to a hospital, got there at 8:00 at night. They looked at me and said, well, you're having a miscarriage, and just left me in the lobby, right? I sat there from 8:00 to about 1:00 in the morning, and I'm a person who has a PhD in healthcare, right? I know the healthcare system well, but I guess the mindset was, well, it's going to pass anyway. But I sat in the lobby for 4 or 5 hours waiting to actually be seen or admitted. I ended up just leaving. That was probably one of the most traumatizing experiences of my life. I literally never talked about it till now because that hospital is so well known, right? I got up, I left, and I never shared that story about how I sat in the hospital lobby having a miscarriage. And then I think about Serena Williams, here's a Black woman with all of this money. And when she was pregnant with her first child, she was telling them, hey, something is wrong. And they definitely were not open-minded enough to listen to her. And I'm like, and here I am, just a common everyday person. I'm saying I have this happening, and I'm educated, well-versed on the healthcare system. I say I have this happening, ignored. Then you hear somebody who's in the upper echelons who has money, right? They're ignored. You got a friend who works in the hospital. They're having complications. Their mama works at the hospital, still getting ignored. So I want to talk about your drive and passion and what you're doing and why you decided to. We know part of the story, but I want to know your work behind Black maternal health. Because I said, even though we identify our speaker for the Black Summit event, I have to have you on this podcast to talk about your passion and advocacy in the work that you're doing, and also to share your experiences as a Black beauty queen, because we're going to circle back around to that too.
Well, so I have just really delved in as far as research, and unfortunately, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and it just seems like an ongoing pattern of that same story happened to Black women, because unfortunately these major healthcare systems, they don't believe us when we're in pain. And from my research, the reason a lot of it stems from this just wayward, primitive research that was, given to us or presented to us in the 1800s, that Black people we endure pain way better than our white counterparts.
I just had this conversation with one of my colleagues who's going to come on the show, right? And I want to, frame it in a nice professional way, in kind of the way you just said it, right? but it is that assumption there. And people could be like, well, Christy, this is the Career Coach RX podcast. Why are you talking about Black maternal health and some of these things? Because again, if you have a platform and you're building this platform and your goal is to make change, right? We have to talk about some of these difficult conversations. So let me allow you to continue, but I just want to reaffirm what you said, that higher pain tolerance or whatever these unrealistic expectations of us as Black people and women, you know.
Yeah, they don't believe Black women when we say we're in pain, we're discomfort, we're in discomfort. And so, through my research, I found out that Black, what we as Black women need to do during our pre and postpartum, stages is to contract a doula, a Black birth worker. And so during my my pageantry title year, I have aligned with the Village of Healing Cleveland, which is a clinic that is geared, a nonprofit clinic that is started by two Black women. And they are geared towards combating the Black maternal health care crisis. So they have doulas, they have a nurse practitioner, and they have pre and post natal care. And I'm an ambassador for them, and I'm preparing to table and just spread the word about them, because they need, Black women who are preparing to have children, who are pregnant, who are in postpartum, they need to know about these services. And my goal is to really bring forth the messaging that Black women, we need to have doula care, and we need to have midwifery care, because the research says, specifically with like political think tank, well, it's not really a political think tank, but it's an organization called Black Mamas Matter Alliance. When Black women have doula care, specifically in the labor and delivery room, our survival rate is 40% higher than when we don't have it. And so my thing is, specifically during my title year, is to bring forth the need to present the need for Black women to have access to organizations like Village of Healing. And then there's also another organization here in Cleveland called Birthing Beautiful Communities, who provide doula care and midwifery care to Black women. And then also to just bring forth the messaging that Black women, even when we're preparing to have children, we might not even be pregnant, but just have it in the front of your mind to contract or talk to a doula or a midwife, so that they can advocate for you every step of the way. Because Black, doulas, they're there to make sure that you have everything you need. They practice, your breathing techniques with you. And they're also advocates in the hospital system. I mean, if you are in a waiting, if you tell your doula or your midwife something's wrong, they will speak to the doctor, they'll speak to the nurse, and they'll say, listen, there's something wrong with my patient. You need to come and see about her. Another thing that I would like to bring forth is the attention of birthing centers. Hospitals are not for everybody. You know what I mean? Giving birth in a hospital isn't for everyone. And so just to use an alternative as it pertains to birthing centers, that's another alternative. Also, I would love for more hospitals to contract doulas, so that, for women who chooses to have their children in the hospital system, they can have an opportunity to have a doula or a midwife, compliments associated with, the healthcare systems here in Cleveland. I won't say their names because I don't want to get sued, but we know who they are. If you live in Cleveland, you know who the major hospital systems are. So just to have a doula or a midwife on hand at the Cleveland, at these Cleveland health care centers. And then also the need for telehealth care. A lot of some Black women, we don't have transportation to get back and forth. Some of us are single parents. Some of us have, partners, but we might have only one car. And so if we have to get to the doctor and we only have one car, and the hospital doesn't provide, bus passes or, transportation, and we have to get to our pre or postnatal appointments, then what? So I'm also advocating for the need for telehealth care as well. So during my title year, and even after my title year, no matter what happens, I mean, I pray I win, but if I don't win, I will still be advocating for the need for Black women to have doula and midwife care, the need for there to be more hiring of Black birth workers, the need for, there to be more birthing centers, the need for telehealth care for Black women. and then, or just for women in general, but Black women in particular, and then the need for major health systems to contract doula and midwives.
I love that, and I threw some statistics there in the chat that I pulled from the Mayo Clinic. I always like to show it with some type of statistics, right? So it's based on the most recent estimates. Non-Hispanic Black women, they were 2.6 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. For Black women, 25 and older, pregnancy-related mortality is about 4 times higher than it is for white women of similar ages. And not because, and I'm just saying this as a health educator, not because of necessarily increased risk. It's about access, right? It's about some of those things that you mentioned. You know, we need to learn to self-advocate, first of all, right? Mm-hmm. Speaking up. But why I'm so passionate about this topic is because if I am a doctor, a person with a degree in global health, not a medical doctor, let me be clear, but if I am a health educator, if you have a friend that has a parent who works in the hospital, if you have Serena Williams who has levels of money that I can only dream of reaching, right, saying this, then there has to be something systemically wrong with the perception, yeah, of how black women are perceived, right? And this topic goes on and on. So if you guys on February 24th, and from 10 o'clock to 12:30, we're going to talk about these topics more in depth. I actually have a nurse practitioner who did her research on PTSD and Black maternal health because of the experiences that we have. I have people coming on talking about mental health. I have folks coming on talking about engagement and advocacy in our community. All of the things that Miss Ariana Johnson embodies as I don't want to say activist, but she's politically engaged. She's socially engaged. She's running for Miss Black Ohio. So the next step for you is Miss Black USA, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Where can we catch you when it comes to watching you on Miss? Where is that streamed, or what happens with that?
Okay, so to my understanding, it's being streamed on Fox Soul.
Okay.
Which I think a lot of people know is like the Black streaming service that's under the Fox network. Mm-hmm. The pageant is August 3rd to August 4th in Washington, D.C. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And so I'm excited. I really am enjoying this experience. It's not like the traditional competition where, all of us are side-eyeing each other, because we've met each other virtually. And it just seems like a very, collaborative and communicative sisterhood. Like, we are really here to help each other and to inspire each other. And, we communicate on Slack, which is like, an app that we use to, make sure that we're up to date as far as the pageantry information. And like, even from our first introductions of each other, everybody was like, "Oh, hi Queen, how are you, Queen?" We, compliment each other and what we're doing on our social media sites. So I'm just excited to meet my ladies.
And how important, I want to jump on that conversation because yes, we are at the 30-minute mark, but I just have a couple more questions to ask you. I want to jump on that conversation because part of what you mentioned there was Black women uplifting other Black women, right? Mm-hmm. Or just women in general. If we take the color away from it, women uplifting women, right? But particularly in the context of this conversation, Black women uplifting Black women. And we talk about the work that we do in terms of advocacy and the political awareness, and you running for Miss Ohio. And you can be a woman out there starting a business. You can be whatever it is that you're doing. This is a great example of women uplifting women. And I want you to speak to that, Ariana. Like, how important is that? Women uplifting women.
Oh, it's very important. I've come across women who have really helped me in my career, just from, helping me figure out what the next step is, because, I have a degree in communications, but that's not a really receptible field, to be honest with you. So they helped me, find different opportunities. And, just imparting wisdom and praying for me and just making sure that I'm okay. Like, "Hey, sis, you all right?" I'm a part of a sorority. And so, they'll check in and make sure.
What sorority is it?
Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority.
Oh, okay. That's cute. that's nice. I'll let you have this moment. I'm just gonna say that blue and white will always
Oh,
win.
okay. We got love for the Zetas. My cousin is a Zeta, so I got love
I
for them.
love
And
us
I got some good
all.
sis.
Nothing
I
but
got some
sisterly
good
love
blue and
for us
white
all.
sisters. It's all love. It's D9
It's all
love.
love. But
Yes.
Ariana, I'm so proud of you,
Thank
and
you.
you're very young, and all of the work that you're doing, and I wish you many successes. I might not. I was just thinking, oh well, DC, you're right down the road from me. Maybe I can just hop on over there. But I probably have drill that weekend because otherwise I would be over there supporting you in a heartbeat for
Thank
Miss
you.
Black USA. I'm very proud of the work that you're doing. I really appreciate your passion and your advocacy for Black maternal health. Again, this is the Career Coach RX podcast. And although we are talking about careers, there are many different paths to different diverse careers and different topics, right? But we also want to make sure that the work that we're doing is meaningful and that we're talking about some of the topics that impact us in our communities. So, Ariana, we're going to wrap up our conversation today. And I want to know, is there any final plugs, any final words of wisdom that you want to share with us?
First of all, Dr. Taylor, I really appreciate you affording this opportunity to me. I love speaking to beautiful Black women who are out here doing their thing, and you are the embodiment of it. So thank you so much for allowing me to be on your platform. You all can find me on Miss Black Ohio USA 2024 on Instagram. And, I thank you for allowing me to be on the show.
All right, guys. So one last final plug for the Health Summit that is going to be on February 24th from 10 o'clock to 12:30. Ariana helped to really kick off that topic about Black maternal health. She gave us so much good information. She also shared her journey and decision to compete. We're going to be supporting you as your virtual brothers and sisters on August, what is it, 2nd and 3rd, when you compete.
3rd and 4th.
August 3rd and 4th, when you compete for Miss Black Ohio USA. You heard it first. If she is named Miss Black USA, then you heard it first because she was on the Career Coach RX podcast. But whether she wins or not, she's always a winner, okay?
Yes,
because she is just a great example of a young person making strides in winning at life. So we're proud of you, Ariana. Thank you for appearing on the show today. Don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms at Career Coach RX. And the replay for this episode of the podcast will be available on YouTube. It will also be available on Spotify as well as Amazon Music and iHeartRadio. Thank you for tuning in today, and we wish you well, Ariana.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I wish you well as well.
Thank you.